is the ring box I made that contains the engagement ring I used to propose to my now fiancée. The box is made out of white ash and wenge. And inside this homemade ring box with the tightly fitting lid is the engagement ring that I also made. I made this little guy out of a brass nut. Now I would show you how I made this ring box and the ring inside of it, but I've already made it and I didn't record any of the footage of me making this, so I can't do that. But what I can do, and what I'm going to do, is I'm going to make a second ring box and a ring to go inside of it so you can see exactly how I made these original ones. The original ring box I made out of white ash and wenge for some nice contrast so you can see these patterns extremely well. For the second ring box, although I'm going to keep the pattern the same, I'm going to make it out of maple and padauk, just for a nice change up in colors. And the first step is to cut these 2 1/4-inch thick strips down into little chunks to make this pattern sandwich. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. All right, now to take this gross looking pattern block over to the table saw for some shaping. There we go, I got my 4 box sides cut out. They're about a 1/4-inch thick each. I didn't measure it because it doesn't matter. And the next step is to shave off a 45-degree angle off of each end so I can join them all together in a box. And by the way, if you thought the last cut had my fingers a little bit too close to the blade, wait until you see this next one. It's going to really have you puckering. All right, I got the 4 sides of my box cut out. Now the next step is to cut a piece of padauk for the bottom of the box and then cut a groove into each one of these 4 pieces to accept that box bottom. All right, time to glue all of this into a box shape, which will involve a lot of this. First, let's mask off the inside seams here to avoid glue squeeze out. And can't forget the bottom. Slots in there like so, and just fold up everything. By the way, I did ever so slightly undersize this bottom piece here to give it room to expand. I don't expect it to expand much because, you know, tiny box, but I gave it a little bit of room in there. Okay, while the glue is drying on my tiny box over there, I'm going to cut a lid out of padauk, and I'm going to make the lid the same way I did on the original box. Just 2 pieces of wood sandwiched together. The top piece is the size of the outside of the box, and the bottom piece is the size of the inside of the box, you know, so it'll fit inside of it. Hey, it's the next day. The glue has had time to dry on these bits and my hands are covered in paint for reasons unrelated to this video. Now let's get these pieces unclamped, trimmed up, and get this little box finished up. Okay, now that my box is all oily, let's move on to the ring, which just like the original, I'm going to make out of one of these. It's just a 14mm brass nut. There's a ring in here somewhere, we just have to dig it out. The theme of this project is very much work with what you got. I don't have a metal lathe, even a small one. If I did, turning this brass nut into a vaguely ringular shape would be a very quick process. But what I do have is this. It's my grandpa's old wood lathe. It's not a very good wood lathe, but it does still spin and do lathy things, so I can use it. So here's how I made the original ring out of a brass nut. The first step was to grind out the threads from the inside of the nut using a small circular hand file. This process took about 20 years. The second thing I did was to grind off the edges of the nut on the disc sander. This process took about 20 seconds. Next, I screwed a small chunk of 2x4 to a faceplate on the lathe and then bored a small hole in the middle of it. Then I could shove my new vaguely circular shaped brass nut into the middle of that hole. Then I could chuck that faceplate with the ring jammed into it onto the lathe and work the inside of the ring with a piece of sandpaper wrapped around a dowel. It took a long time to get to the final inside shape of the ring. Then after the inside of the ring was worked to a fine-ish finish, I could unjam that ring from that hole that I bored in the 2x4 and jam the ring onto a dowel so I could work the outside of it with some files and sandpaper and other abrasive-y things. And then the ring was mostly done. Now, if you're wondering why I'm just telling you how I made the original ring instead of showing you how I made it by making a second ring in the same way, it's because the second ring I'm going to be making slightly differently because of the addition of two new tools. The first tool is this. It's a 3-jaw chuck. This old chuck also belonged to my grandpa, and it was found in his old workshop vaguely near this wood lathe. I don't know why he had it, because this is not a typical wood lathe accessory, but he had it, and I'm going to use it because it'll make my life easier. The second new addition is this. It's a mini metal lathe bit set from Harbor Freight, and it set me back a whole 16 bucks, I think it was. They're just carbide brazed steel, drop forged steel tool with tungsten carbide tips for general purpose turning applications, as it says on the box. And I can use these in combination with this 3-jaw chuck to dramatically speed up the shaping of that brass nut into a ringular shape. A metal lathe, this is not. The inside diameter I'm shooting for is 15.75 millimeters, because that's the ring size of my lady. That's pretty close. I'm gonna call it good. All right, now I can work the insides with various grits of sandpaper wrapped around an eye bolt. For the final outside shaping and filing, I've got the ring jammed onto this dowel here. It's a pretty tight fit, so hopefully it won't slip. Oh, it slipped. All right, let's see if this holds it on. Well, that didn't work either. All right, new plan. File down the end just a bit. Put the ring in place. Then, to make sure the ring doesn't slip off the dowel, drive a screw in here without pre-drilling and hope it expands the dowel enough to grip onto the ring. All right, now to polish this thing. The ring is done, and it's all polished up, and it doesn't look half bad if I do say so myself. It looks a lot better than the first one, and it took about 1/5 the time to make than the first one, which is because of the new tools that I had at my disposal. Now it's time to finish up this pretty little box that the ring fits in. I'm going to turn this piece of dowel into a vaguely finger-like shape to hold the ring inside the box, but I don't have any turning tools, so I'm going to use a chisel. And here we are. Everything's finished, the ring box and the ring. And this second ring turned out substantially better than the first ring. The first ring had some problems, like the hole was slightly off center, which if you looked at it for long enough, you could definitely see, and it was a little bit too thick. This one turned out relatively perfectly. Now the second ring box, I think I'm still more of a fan of the original ring box, but that's entirely because of the species of wood I chose. I like the black and white color scheme compared to the Padauk and the maple that I have here. Otherwise, the two ring boxes are basically identical. Now, if you're wondering if I expected her to wear this ring, the answer is no. I never expected for her to wear this ring, nor did I ever intend for her to wear this ring. I made the original ring for two reasons. One, experimentation. I wanted to see if I could make something that was a passable ring using the tools and materials I had on hand. And two, because she wanted to pick her own engagement ring. I wanted her to pick her own engagement ring because I have no sense of style. But if she's picking her own engagement ring, I needed something to put in the box when I popped the question. So I made a ring. It's just a ceremonial symbol. It's the thought that counts sort of gesture. If I actually intended for her to wear this thing, I'd have to take an extra step because this is brass. It turned her skin green. I could either coat it in a light layer of epoxy to protect the brass from her skin, or I could send this off to a jeweler, a real jeweler, and have it gold plated, which is something I might actually do in the future. Not for this one, this is just a showpiece, but for homemade wedding bands. I could make our own wedding bands because this is a passable ring. I'd wear this, providing it was bigger because, you know, hot dog fingers. And I could just make two more of these things, send them off to jewelers, have them gold plated, and shoot, I've already got two ring boxes at the ready for the wedding, so why not? I think I'm going to make our own wedding bands. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little project, and I'm getting married, so that's neat. I don't know how she tolerates me.